Bette Davis, the name that once captivated millions, was not only celebrated for her brilliant performances, but also notorious for her scandal-filled personal life. During her career of more than 50 years, she faced off against Joan Crawford in one of the most famous film feuds of all time, gradually establishing her position in Hollywood with her uncompromising courage. Yet behind the spotlight, her life was far darker than anyone imagined. A husband's sudden and mysterious death in 1943, 4 failed marriages, and a great love story more chaotic than any movie script. Who truly understood Bette Davis? And what really happened after that shocking death? Keep watching to uncover the untold truth about Hollywood's two-faced queen. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of tea, or just water, and sit back as we begin this journey together. Ab Lexton. Bette Davis's most famous love affair with another Hollywood star became legendary. But it wasn't the only clash she had in the City of Dreams. The most painful betrayal she ever faced came from someone she never expected. In 1930, Davis arrived in Hollywood with eyes full of hope for her very first screen test. At the airport, she waited for hours, believing the studio executive would come to greet her. He did show up, but after glancing around, he coldly said, "I don't see anyone attractive enough to be an actress," and walked away. In those days, talent meant nothing in Hollywood without sex appeal. Bette Davis, with her intelligent face, fiery eyes, and unconventional beauty, didn't fit that mold. But instead of breaking down, she swallowed her tears and vowed to prove that real worth wasn't measured by a dress or a shade of lipstick. In the early years of her career, Davis was thrown into a string of forgettable roles. Critics called her the actress with defiant eyes, while audiences could hardly remember her name. Everything seemed to crumble until The Man Who Played God premiered. A story about a pianist who loses his hearing. Davis's performance finally earned her recognition, and her star began to rise. After playing a villain in Of Human Bondage, Davis believed she had truly made it. But in Hollywood at that time, studios ruled everything, and Warner Brothers was a gilded cage. The studio forced her into cheap, shallow roles that Davis saw as an insult to her craft. She rebelled. She refused parts, argued with directors, and even fled to England to sign with another company. An act of career suicide in an industry where studios owned your life. Warner sued. Davis lost. Yet when she returned, she did not bow her head. Instead, she demanded higher pay and finally secured the serious roles she had always wanted. Her career soared, but her marriage did not. Bette Davis had met Harmon Nelson. Their marriage became a cycle of control, coldness, and emotional abuse. Nelson was jealous of his wife's success and twice forced her to have abortions. In an era when that was both immoral and dangerous, the experience left a wound that never healed. The more she suffered, the deeper she buried herself in her work, as if acting were the only way to escape reality. And then Joan Crawford appeared. If Davis embodied fierce individuality, Crawford represented icy allure. The two strongest women in Hollywood couldn't share the same sky. Their feud began in 1933 when Davis was about to be introduced by Universal as Hollywood's next big star. But on that very day, Joan Crawford suddenly announced her divorce from Douglas Fairbanks Jr., stealing every newspaper headline. Davis's spotlight vanished overnight. The rivalry deepened when Davis starred in Dangerous alongside the charming Francho Tone, a man she fell for. Tragically, he was already Crawford's lover. To assert her dominance, Crawford forced Tone to propose to her while he and Davis were still filming. Each day on set, Davis had to watch the man she loved affectionately laugh with her rival. From that moment on, she vowed never to forgive Joan Crawford. In 1936, Davis was nominated for an Oscar for Dangerous. She hadn't planned to attend, convinced she wouldn't win, but Warner Brothers demanded her presence. In defiance, Davis wore a hideous, ill-fitting, outdated gown, a mockery of Hollywood's vanity. Fate, however, had other plans. She won. As she walked to the stage in that disastrous dress, the audience fell silent. Then, Joan Crawford's cold voice cut through the room. "Dear Bette, your dress is simply divine." That mocking smile wasn't just sarcasm. It was the opening shot in Hollywood's greatest war between two queens. In 1938, Bette Davis signed on to star in Jezebel, directed by William Wyler. From the very first day on set, something dangerous yet irresistible ignited between them. Wyler was calm, deep, with eyes that seemed to read every thought. Davis was intelligent, proud, and hungry to love with all the fire in her heart. The two soon fell into a passionate affair right in the middle of filming, where every look, every gesture on screen was not acting, but truth disguised as performance. But Hollywood never let anyone be happy in silence. When Jezebel premiered, gossip columnist Hetta Hopper unleashed a storm, claiming Bette Davis was in love with her co-star Henry Fonda. "You can't look at someone that way unless you truly love them," Hopper wrote. Davis only laughed because Hopper was right, but only halfway. The man behind those fiery glances wasn't Fonda. It was Wyler, the one behind the camera who held her heart. Later, Davis would admit without hesitation, "Wyler was the great love of my life. No doubt about it." When the film ended, harsh reality returned. Davis discovered she was pregnant. The child was the result of her secret affair, not her crumbling marriage to Harmon Nelson. In her confusion, she hoped Wyler would propose that they could defy Hollywood's judgment and be together. But that proposal never came. When Wyler didn't get down on one knee, she quietly ended the pregnancy and the affair. Yet, Bette Davis never let tears smudge her lipstick. Not long after, she appeared at a lavish party attended by the man everyone in Hollywood feared and admired. Howard Hughes, millionaire, aviator, and the ultimate conqueror. When Hughes asked her out, Davis replied with a half-sarcastic, half-reckless smile, "I'm bored. I'm married. And why not?" Their brief date quickly became the hottest headline in town. Davis's husband, already suspicious, hired a private detective, and the rumours proved true. The news spread through Hollywood like wildfire. When reporters surrounded her demanding answers, Davis didn't deny a thing. She simply shrugged and said a line that froze the world. "I'm just taking a vacation from my marriage." But every vacation ends. Nelson, accustomed to a luxurious life funded by his wife's fame, demanded a large sum if Davis wanted a divorce. She hesitated, not out of greed, but out of principle. She turned to Hughes, hoping her wealthy lover would help her escape the failed marriage. But Hughes, cold and detached, refused. "I don't buy anyone's freedom," he said. Those words cut like a knife. Davis reluctantly paid her husband herself and ended things with Hughes, calling him in her own sharp way stingy. After her first marriage fell apart, Bette Davis burned with a fierce desire to prove herself. She poured every ounce of emotion into her work and accepted a role in The Old Maid, a film that seemed destined to mark a new chapter in her career, but instead opened another brutal war. Her new rival was Miriam Hopkins, a beautiful yet ruthlessly ambitious actress. On the very first day of filming, Hopkins showed up wearing the same dress Davis had worn when accepting her Oscar for Jezebel. A small gesture, but one that turned the entire atmosphere icy. Hopkins had once auditioned for Jezebel, but lost the part. And in her eyes, Davis had stolen both the role and the glory. As production went on, their conflict deepened. Hopkins suspected that Davis had been romantically involved with her husband, director Anatol Litvak, a talented filmmaker of Slavic descent. Davis, known for her fiery temper and refusal to back down, met hostility with defiance. On set, they competed for every light, every frame. Each scene could erupt into open warfare. Once, Hopkins deliberately ruined one of Davis's takes, forcing the entire crew to halt filming for the rest of the day. The feud reached its peak during a promotional photo shoot. Both actresses wore boxing gloves, glaring at each other, a biting publicity stunt for what became Hollywood's most infamous rivalry. When The Old Maid wrapped, Davis thought the storm had passed, but her life was never free of turmoil. She soon co-starred with Errol Flynn, the dashing leading man known for his charm and reckless spirit. When asked about Flynn's talent, Davis gave a sly half-smile. "He's very handsome." Then she added dryly, "He once admitted he knew nothing about acting, and I truly admire that honesty, because he was absolutely right." Amid the fame and film sets, Davis remained haunted by unfinished love. Friends later recalled that William Wyler, the great love of her life, had returned in 1940, proposing marriage and wanting to wed within the week. Davis refused. Why? Perhaps she feared losing her independence, feared being tied down. Years later, she would call it the stupidest decision I ever made. After turning down Wyler, Davis soon entered another relationship, marrying Arthur Farnsworth, a handsome innkeeper. But that marriage lasted only 3 years. Farnsworth died suddenly on a Hollywood street, and his death was as mysterious as it was tragic. An autopsy revealed a skull fracture that had occurred 2 weeks before his death. Police questioned Davis, but her statements only deepened the mystery. She claimed she had no idea what caused the fatal injury, but mentioned that her husband had once fallen down the stairs while hurrying to answer the phone. The death was officially ruled an accident. Yet, with Davis's fiery reputation, the public never stopped whispering that something about it didn't seem right. After 2 failed marriages in 1945, Davis entered her 3rd one with artist William Sherry, believing she had finally found peace. But reality proved cruel. Sherry was violent, quick-tempered, and often took out his anger with his fists. Davis frequently had to visit doctors for her injuries. On one occasion, a physician sighed, "How could a woman as intelligent as you marry a man like that?" The remark cut deep into Davis's pride, the once glorious star of Hollywood. Reduced to a victim within her own home. In 1947, at nearly 40, Davis gave birth to her only child, Barbara. Yet, ironically, that child would later become the greatest source of pain in her life. After childbirth, her once blazing fame dimmed, and studios hesitated to offer her roles. But the queen of acting never surrendered. By 1950, she made a triumphant comeback with All About Eve, the classic film that catapulted her back to the top. On set, she met Gary Merrill, a co-star who made her heart race. When filming wrapped, Davis divorced Sherry and married Merrill in less than a month. Together, they adopted 2 children and dreamed of a perfect family. But as if cursed, Davis's happiness never lasted. After 10 turbulent years, the marriage ended in bitterness. When asked what went wrong, she gave a sharp, unforgettable reply. Gary was a strong man, but none of them were ever strong enough to be Mr. B. Davis. In the 1960s, Davis turned a new page with Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, the psychological horror film that revived her career and cemented her legacy. But behind that masterpiece was a cold-blooded war with her lifelong nemesis, Joan Crawford. From the moment Davis signed the contract, she set 2 firm conditions. She must play the lead role of Jane, and the director must not have any romantic involvement with Crawford. On-screen, they played sisters. Off-screen, it was open warfare. During one scene, Davis, who suffered from chronic back pain, had to drag Crawford across the floor. Knowing this, Crawford secretly filled her costume pockets with weights and ice to make herself heavier, nearly breaking Davis's back. On other days, she deliberately ruined takes, forcing Davis to repeat exhausting scenes again and again until she could barely stand. When the film premiered, the tension boiled over. Before the press, Davis famously sneered, "Joan Crawford is a movie star. I'm a real actress." And even more venomously, Crawford slept with every male star MGM except Lassie the dog. Crawford got her revenge with perfect Hollywood flair. When Baby Jane was nominated for an Oscar, Davis was certain she would win. But on the night of the ceremony, the real twist came. When the winner couldn't attend, Joan Crawford, who wasn't even nominated, marched on stage to accept the award on their behalf, basking in thunderous applause. In the front row, Davis sat frozen, her face flushed with fury. Their feud endured until death. In 1977, when Joan Crawford passed away, a reporter asked Davis for her thoughts. She coolly replied, "They say you shouldn't speak ill of the dead, so I'll say something good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." Then in 1983, the greatest tragedy of Davis's life struck. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. Chemotherapy weakened the once indomitable star, and over the next 2 years, she suffered 4 consecutive strokes that left the left side of her face and arm paralysed. The woman who had once made Hollywood tremble now had to relearn how to hold a spoon, how to speak, how to walk. Yet, true to form, Davis refused to surrender. She continued to appear in public, proud and composed, hiding her pain behind red lipstick and her signature steel gaze. But what finally broke her wasn't illness. It was betrayal. In 1985, her only daughter, Barbara Davis Sherry, known as BD, published a memoir titled My Mother's Keeper, portraying Bette Davis as an alcoholic, domineering woman who humiliated her children in public. The book sent shockwaves through Hollywood and shattered Davis's heart. For a woman who valued her image as sacred, being torn down by her own child was a wound that would never heal. She never forgave BD, nor spoke to her again. A close friend once recalled Davis whispering, "I've lost many things in life, but losing the child I gave birth to, that's the one pain I can't survive." In her final years, Bette Davis lived a quiet, reclusive life in a small house with her devoted assistant. As she felt death approaching, she left one last instruction. "Don't let my son see me weak. He should remember me as the woman I once was." It wasn't just a farewell. It was the declaration of an entire life. Bette Davis chose to leave this world with her head held high, just as she had fought to survive in the ruthless world of Hollywood. On October 6th, 1989, she took her last breath in her assistant's arms, closing a life filled with both glory and solitude. But the tragedy didn't end there. When Davis's will was revealed, the world was once again stunned. She left her entire estate to only 2 people, her adopted son, Michael Merrill, and her loyal assistant. In the document, Davis made it clear that she was of sound mind and deliberate intention in excluding BD from her inheritance. Yet, what caused even more controversy was the absence of another name, Margot Merrill, her adopted daughter, who had suffered brain damage as a child. Margot had once been a fragile hope in Davis's heart, but when doctors confirmed that the girl would never develop normally, the actress made the heartbreaking decision to place her in a special care institution. At first, Davis visited often, but the visits grew fewer and eventually stopped. From that point on, Margot's name was almost erased from Davis's life, to the extent that after the actress's death, no one even knew where Margot was living. B. Davis once said, "I am not afraid of death. I'm afraid of being forgotten." And perhaps that was the one thing she never had to fear. Despite a life marred by betrayal, tragedy, and loneliness, Davis remains an immortal symbol of classic Hollywood. The woman who dared to defy every standard of beauty, to prove that true art comes from the soul, not the face. With eyes sharp as blades and a voice cold yet brimming with emotion, Davis carved a path for generations of actresses who came after her. Women who didn't need to be perfect, but needed to be real. She was one of a kind, unreplicable, irreplaceable. And though time may fade everything else, the light of her name still shines across the silver screen, a reminder that legends never die. They simply transform into eternity. Heat, heat,